My beloved child, before you scroll away, I need you to stay with me for just a few moments. There is a reason your eyes stopped here today. Out of the millions of videos you could have seen, this one found you. Not yesterday. Not tomorrow. Right now. And there is something you need to hear. Someone connected to your past has been carrying a secret much heavier than anyone realizes. They have tried to convince themselves that your story ended a long time ago. They have repeated the same words in their mind again and again. It's over. It's too late. They have already moved on. But every time they believed those words, something happened that shattered the illusion. A memory appeared without warning. A familiar song started playing. Your name showed up where they least expected it. And suddenly, everything they had worked so hard to bury came rushing back. Last night, they sat alone, holding their phone in complete silence. They opened your old conversation. They scrolled through messages they promised themselves they would never read again. They smiled at one message, then their eyes filled with tears. For a moment, they almost pressed your name. For a moment, they almost called you. For a moment, they almost sent the message they have been hiding for so long. But fear stopped them. Not because they stopped caring. Not because they forgot you. But because they were terrified of what would happen if you finally knew the truth. If you discovered how many nights they still think about you. If you discovered how many times they whispered your name when no one else was around. If you discovered that moving on was never as easy as they pretended. Deep inside, they wished something impossible. They wished you would never hear what was happening inside their heart. They wished you would never find out that everything they showed the world was only a mask. Because if you knew, everything would change. But my beloved child, secrets cannot stay hidden forever. And today, one of those secrets begins to come into the light. My beloved child, listen carefully, because what happened next was something they never expected. After sitting in silence for what felt like hours, they closed your old conversation. They told themselves, that's enough. I have to let this go. But before they could put the phone away, a memory notification appeared. It was an old photo. A moment they had almost forgotten. The second they saw it, everything they had been trying to hide came flooding back. They remembered the laughter. They remembered the words left unsaid. And most of all, they remembered the goodbye that never truly felt like the end. Their heart began asking questions their mind could no longer ignore. What if I made the biggest mistake of my life? What if they were never the person I was supposed to leave behind? For the first time in a long time, they stopped blaming you. Instead, they started looking at themselves. Every decision, every moment of pride, every message they never answered, every apology they never had the courage to send. The truth became impossible to escape. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was that fear had been making every decision for them. Fear of rejection. Fear that too much time had passed. Fear that you had already found happiness without them. So they stayed silent. Even though silence hurt more than speaking ever could. Then something unexpected happened. Their phone vibrated. It wasn't your message. It wasn't your call. It was someone close to them asking a simple question. Why do you still keep their picture? They froze. For several seconds, they couldn't answer. Because no explanation sounded honest enough. They could have deleted the picture months ago. They could have erased every reminder. But they never did. Because a part of them was still holding on to the hope that one day, the story between you would have another chapter. And at that exact moment, they made a decision that could change everything. They opened a blank message, placed your name at the top of the screen, rested their fingers on the keyboard, and typed the first 4 words. Then suddenly, they stopped. Because what appeared on their screen next made them question whether this was only a coincidence, or a sign they could no longer ignore. My beloved child, the moment their fingers stopped above the keyboard, they felt something they had been trying to avoid for a very long time. Their heartbeat became louder than their thoughts. The 4 words they had typed remained on the screen. I need to talk. They read them once. Then again. Then they reached for the delete key. But before they could erase a single letter, another notification appeared. It was not your message. It was not a phone call. It was a quote they had saved months ago without thinking much about it. It simply said, "The hardest conversation is often the one that changes your life." They stared at those words for several seconds. They tried to laugh it off. They told themselves it was only a coincidence. But something inside them refused to believe that. For the first time, they stopped asking, "What if they reject me?" Instead, they started asking, "What if I lose the chance forever because I stayed silent?" That question changed everything. They stood up and walked around the room, hoping the feeling would disappear. It didn't. They looked out of the window. Your memories followed them. They played music. Every song reminded them of another chapter of your story. No matter what they did, they could not escape the truth. Then they opened their gallery. Hundreds of photos were there. But without searching, their fingers stopped on one picture connected to you. They smiled without realizing it. A smile mixed with regret. A smile mixed with hope. A smile that quietly admitted something they had denied for far too long. At that moment, they whispered to themselves, "Maybe it's finally time." They returned to the message. This time, they didn't delete the words. They added another sentence. Then another. The message became longer. More honest. More vulnerable than anything they had ever written before. They were only one tap away from sending it. One tap. One decision. One moment that could change both of your lives. But just as their thumb moved toward the send button, their phone rang. The name that appeared on the screen made them freeze. Because it was someone who knew the biggest secret they had been hiding about you. And what that person said in the next few seconds made them put the message on hold once again. My beloved child, when they answered the phone, they expected an ordinary conversation. But the voice on the other end was unusually serious. There was a long silence before a single question was asked. "Can I ask you something honestly?" They quietly replied, "Yes." The voice continued, "Have you really forgotten them, or are you just pretending?" The question hit them harder than they expected. For a few seconds, they couldn't speak. Every excuse they had prepared disappeared. Every wall they had built around their heart began to crack. Finally, they admitted something they had never said out loud. I tried to move on, but I never stopped thinking about them. The person on the phone didn't sound surprised. Instead, they softly said, I already knew. Those words changed the atmosphere completely. They asked, how? The reply came immediately. Because every time someone mentions their name, your face changes. You become quiet. You look away. You smile without realizing it. Hearing someone else notice what they had tried so hard to hide made their heart race. For the first time, they realized their feelings had never been as invisible as they believed. Then the conversation became even more personal. What are you waiting for? They had no answer. Was it fear? Pride? Or simply the belief that too much time had passed? Deep inside, they knew none of those reasons felt strong enough anymore. After the call ended, they looked at your unfinished message again. Nothing about it felt accidental. Nothing about that night felt ordinary. They took a deep breath. Their thumb moved toward the send button once more. This time, they were determined not to stop. But just before they pressed it, a new notification appeared at the top of the screen. It wasn't from you. It wasn't from a friend. It was something so unexpected that they whispered, maybe this is the sign I've been waiting for. They opened it slowly. The words on the screen made them stop breathing for a moment. Because it reminded them of a promise connected to you, a promise they thought had been forgotten forever. And in that moment, they realized that if they stayed silent one more day, they might lose the chance to tell you the truth forever. My beloved child, with trembling hands, they opened the notification. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. It was only a few simple words. But those words carried a memory they had spent months trying to forget. Suddenly, they were taken back to the last time they saw you. They remembered the look in your eyes. They remembered the silence that lasted longer than either of you expected. And they remembered the promise that was never spoken aloud. If the time is ever right, don't let fear make the decision. For a moment, they closed their eyes. Everything became clear. The distance. The silence. The unanswered questions. None of it had erased what they truly felt. It had only hidden it. They looked at your name on the screen one more time. This time, they didn't think about pride. They didn't think about who should text first. They didn't think about what other people might say. They only thought about one thing. What if this is my last chance to tell the truth? They finished writing the message. No games. No pretending. No excuses. Just honesty. Their thumb hovered over the send button. 3, 2, 1. They pressed it. The message was gone. There was no way to take it back. For the first time in a long while, they felt both terrified and relieved. Now there was only one thing left to do. Wait. Every passing minute felt like an hour. They checked the screen again. Nothing. A few more minutes passed. Still nothing. Then, the phone vibrated. Your name appeared on the screen. Their heart began pounding. Slowly, they opened your reply. The very first sentence made their eyes fill with tears. Because instead of anger, instead of blame, instead of rejection, you wrote something they had never expected to read. And those words changed the future of both your lives forever. My beloved child, the moment they saw your reply, they didn't open it immediately. Instead, they locked their phone. They placed it face down on the table. Because after waiting for so long, they were suddenly afraid of knowing the truth. What if this is only goodbye? What if I was too late? For nearly 20 minutes, they walked around the room trying to calm their thoughts. Finally, they picked up the phone again. Your message was still waiting. With trembling hands, they opened it. The first line made them stop breathing. I wondered if you would ever find the courage to reach out. They read it again. Then again. But before they could continue, another message from you appeared. It simply said, "There's something you don't know." Their hearts started racing. They typed, "What do you mean?" You didn't answer. Instead, you went offline. Minutes passed. Then an hour. No reply. Every possibility filled their mind. Were you scared? Were you protecting someone? Or was there a truth you had hidden for all this time? Just when they thought the conversation had ended, your profile picture disappeared. Your last scene vanished. Everything went silent. They whispered, "Why now?" Then their phone vibrated once more. It wasn't from you. It was from someone who knew both of you. The message contained only one sentence. Before you believe anything, there's something about your past that neither of you has ever been told. They froze. Because deep inside, they knew this conversation was no longer just about two people. It was about a secret that had been hidden for years. My beloved child, those words refused to leave their mind. There's something about your past that neither of you has ever been told. They read the message again. And again. Every time they looked at it, the meaning seemed different. Their first instinct was to ignore it. They told themselves, "This has nothing to do with us." But their heart wouldn't let them. So they replied with one simple question. "What are you talking about?" No answer. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. Then, finally, the phone vibrated. The reply was shorter than they expected. Not over text. "Meet me tomorrow." That was all. No explanation. No details. Just a place. And a time. The rest of the night felt endless. Sleep never came. Every memory of you returned. The first conversation. The first smile. The misunderstandings. The silence that followed. For the first time, they wondered if the ending of your story had never been the real ending at all. The next afternoon, they arrived early. The cafe was almost empty. They chose a table near the window and kept checking the entrance every few seconds. Then, the door opened. The person who had sent the message walked in. They sat down without smiling. Without ordering anything. Without wasting a single second. They quietly placed an old envelope on the table. Its edges were worn. Its paper had turned slightly yellow with age. Across the front, both of your names were written in faded ink. Their hands began to shake. "What is this?" they whispered. The person across from them took a deep breath and said, "This should have reached you years ago, but it never did." Slowly, they opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter. And beneath it, one old photograph they had never seen before. The moment they recognized who was standing beside you in that picture, the color disappeared from their face. Because the truth hidden inside that envelope had the power to change everything they believed about your past. My beloved child, they couldn't take their eyes off the photograph. At first, it looked ordinary. An old picture. A familiar place. A moment frozen in time. But the longer they looked, the more details they noticed. There, in the background, was someone they never expected to see. Someone who had always claimed they knew nothing about your story. Their heartbeat grew faster. They turned the photograph over. On the back, a date had been written by hand. It was the very week everything between you had fallen apart. They looked up in disbelief. "Who took this picture?" they asked. The person across the table didn't answer immediately. Instead, they slid the folded letter a little closer and quietly said, "Read this first. Then you'll understand why the truth stayed hidden for so long." With trembling hands, they unfolded the letter. The first sentence made them sit completely still. If you're reading this now, it means the truth was delayed, but it could not stay hidden forever. Every word that followed felt heavier than the last. The letter revealed that a misunderstanding had changed the course of 2 lives. A message that should have reached you never did. An explanation that should have ended the silence was never delivered. A choice that looked intentional had been built on incomplete information. They stopped reading and closed their eyes. For the first time, they realized something heartbreaking. What if neither of you had truly walked away? What if both of you had spent years believing a story that was never completely true? Tears filled their eyes. Not because the past could be changed, but because the future suddenly looked different. They reached for their phone. Your chat was still open. Their fingers hovered above the keyboard once again. This time, there were no rehearsed speeches. No carefully chosen words. Only one question remained. Before they could type it, another folded page slipped out from inside the envelope and landed on the table. At the bottom of that page was a single handwritten name. The moment they recognized whose name it was, they whispered. So, they knew everything from the beginning? And suddenly, the mystery became even deeper. My beloved child, for several long moments, they simply stared at the handwritten name. It couldn't be true. Out of everyone, this was the one person they trusted the most. Their hands became cold. Their thoughts raced. If they knew the truth all along, why didn't they tell us? The room felt silent. Even the sound of people talking around them seemed to disappear. Slowly, they picked up the second page. Near the bottom was a short note. Some truths are hidden because people think they're protecting you. But sometimes, protection creates a deeper wound than the truth itself. They read that line over and over. Suddenly, years of confusion began to make sense. The unanswered messages. The strange distance. The unexpected silence. The moments when everything changed without any clear reason. None of it had happened the way they had believed. They looked across the table. "Who else knows about this?" they asked quietly. The person sitting opposite lowered their eyes. Then they answered. "Very few people. And not everyone agreed that you should ever find out." A chill ran through their body. "Why?" The reply came softly. "Because someone was afraid that if the truth came out, you would find your way back to each other." Those words echoed in their mind. Find your way back. Could that really be the reason? Before they could ask another question, the person reached into their bag one last time. They placed a small key on the table. An old brass key. Worn with age. No label. No explanation. Only one sentence. "This opens the place where the final piece of your story has been waiting." They frowned. "What place?" The person stood up. They smiled sadly. And before walking away, they whispered, "You'll understand, when you open the door." Now they were left with only three things. The photograph. The letter. And the mysterious key. They had no idea where it belonged. But deep inside, they knew that opening whatever it unlocked would reveal a truth that could never be hidden again. My beloved child, the old brass key stayed in their hand the entire journey home. They couldn't stop looking at it. It wasn't valuable because of what it was made of. It was valuable because of the question it carried. What was it waiting to unlock? The next morning, they followed the only clue they had been given. It led them to a small building on a quiet street. The caretaker looked at the key, smiled gently, and said, "I've been wondering when someone would finally come for this." Without another word, the caretaker led them down a narrow hallway and stopped in front of a wooden door. The lock matched the key perfectly. For a moment, they hesitated. Then, they turned it. The door opened with a soft creak. Inside was a small room filled with old boxes, photographs, notebooks, and letters. One box had both of your names written across the top. They slowly lifted the lid. Inside were memories neither of you knew had been preserved. Photos from happier days. Handwritten notes. A birthday card that had never been delivered. And at the very bottom, a sealed envelope. Across the front, in familiar handwriting, were the words, "To the day we finally learn the truth." Their hands trembled as they opened it. Inside was a letter explaining everything. The misunderstanding that separated you had never been created by either of you. Messages had gone undelivered. Assumptions had replaced conversations. Pride had filled the space where honesty should have lived. Neither heart had stopped loving. Both hearts had simply stopped believing they were still loved. Tears rolled down their face. Not because they had lost you, but because they realized how much time had been stolen by silence. They picked up their phone. This time, there was no fear. No hesitation. Only truth. They called you. The phone rang once. Twice. Then you answered. For a few seconds, neither of you spoke. Finally, they whispered. I'm sorry. On the other end came a quiet reply. I've been waiting to hear those words for a very long time. You talked for hours. Not about who was right. Not about who was wrong. But about everything that had remained unsaid. Some wounds could not be erased. Some years could never be returned. But forgiveness made room for a new beginning. Weeks later, the two of you met again. There were no dramatic speeches. No perfect movie scene. Just two people choosing honesty instead of silence. As the sun began to set, they smiled and said, "If I had one wish, it wouldn't be to change the past. It would be to never let fear decide our future again." You smiled back. Then let's write a better future together. My beloved child, not every story ends with people finding each other again. But every story can end with truth, healing, forgiveness, and the courage to move forward. And sometimes, that is the greatest miracle of all.